12 missed calls. My eyes never shifted as my phone continued vibrating on the old oak counter. My hands softly gripped the wet glass of my sixth pour. 13. I'm tired of this. Tired of the noise, the fighting. I'm tired of holding on to this chaotic thing my wife and I called love. Even then I could still smell her amongst the spilled drinks and cigarettes that engulfed the depressing bar. Lavender. The scent lingered inside my nostrils. 14. Her screams echoed in my head. There had been no love that evening, no minced words given, no care as we went back and forth like a pair of rabid dogs. I took another sip of whiskey, the burning sensation long gone, each swallow easier than the last. Had I stayed even a moment longer in that wretched house, God only knows what blackened sins would have followed. I've never laid a hand on her. I'm proud of that. A low bar, as my wife would say. I turned the glass in my hands. Every now and then, through the drink's reflection, I could see him. I'd see that twisted grin on my father's face. My father. I was only a child then. All I could do was watch him wave his bloody fists in front of me. My mother on the floor. Tears ran down her face and over her trembling lips. I'll never forget his beating black eyes as he looked down at me. That hurtful grin across his face never faded, even when the police dragged him away. I knew if I stayed any longer at that house, the rage he passed down to me would finally break free. I had to get away, if only for a while, praying I would find salvation down in an empty glass. The phone vibrated once more. 15. The voicemail had been full for months. I had no intention of letting her leave any voicemails in order for her to berate me. Tell me how I am not a man, always running away from confrontation, always breaking my promises. I finished the glass and slammed it against the counter, not a care in the world for the bartender's glare. I paid my tab, grabbed my coat, and stumbled out of the bar and into the winter cold. My thumb hovered over the dim screen as I staggered towards my truck. Dread pitted in the bottom of my stomach as I scrolled through the text messages, each message begging for a response, an apology sprinkled amongst the cries and accusations. I held my breath as I read the last message over and over again. It stopped me cold, and at the time, I had no inclination as to why. There was no apology, no anger, just 4 simple words. It's not a tree. I had no right to be on that godforsaken road. My sweat had crept down into my eyes. I could barely see where I was going. The whiskey had finally taken its toll. Snow and ice coated the pavement. I had lost count of how many times I had to swerve away from the tall drifts. I had lifted my phone and tried to call her multiple times. Not a single answer. A taste of my own medicine. I tossed my phone in frustration, cursing under my breath as my eyes settled back on the road. 2 glowing eyes stared back at me, its antlers raised towards the night sky. I had bitten my tongue as I stomped onto the brakes. The tires slipped. Antlers had burst through the windshield and barely missed my right shoulder. I swerved to the right and took us both into the ditch. The airbag failed to deploy. My head slammed into the steering wheel. I was then embraced by the cold darkness. My eyes opened as she whispered my name. There she was laying next to me in our bed. No tears, no rage. Mandy had taken the white bedsheet and loosely draped it over ourselves. The thin fabric glowed as the morning sun pressed its rays through it. I could see her clearly through the veil of white. Her face was so calm and unguarded. Nothing like the way I had left her. She leaned in with a gentle kiss, her skin soft and warm as her long black hair softly dangled above me. I stayed perfectly still, afraid that even the smallest movement might break this moment. I wanted to cherish this as long as I could, if only our whole marriage was like this very moment. Her lips parted. I expected her to say she loves me or something sweet. Instead, the sound that came out of her mouth tore through the warmth. A shrieking animalistic scream split the air between us. The light had vanished in an instant, as her warmth was ripped away from me and my eyes witnessed a black void in front of me. The cold air rushed past my face as I gasped for air, my beard covered in brittled strands of ice. I don't know how long I was out for, not sure how I was even ejected from the truck. I had found myself a few feet away, lying in the snow like I had been dragged away from a fire. The buck screeched as it frantically tried to dislodge itself from the windshield. I carefully approached the driver's side. My door was wide open. The truck's bright beams illuminated what remained of the damned thing. I had the deer pinned in half against the ditch. There was nothing I could do. The truck was the only thing keeping it together. I grabbed my hunting knife from the back seat. The deer's helpless, scared eyes stared back at me, letting out a soft whimper as I ended it quickly. There was no getting the truck out of the ditch, not without a tow. We lived far enough away there was no point in waiting for anyone to drive by. I looked for my phone inside. I know I tossed it before the crash, yet it's not here. The phone somehow had just vanished into thin air. I looked back to where I was laying. My head throbbed as I dug into the snow looking for the phone in case I had it on me when I somehow ended up in the snow earlier. Still unable to find it, I cursed into the night air. I then stood there for some time to clear my head. How the hell did I even get there? Did I crawl away and pass out on the snow? After giving up for what felt like an eternity, I grabbed my emergency flashlight and slammed the driver's side door. A half-mile walk in a winter storm in the dark does things to a man. No phone, no one coming to save me. Just the cold wind with the endless Maine trees that surrounded me. The wind picked up as I walked on the lonely, slick road. I did my best to keep my face covered as much as possible. There is a moment when you get so cold that it starts to burn and itch before going numb. Only a warning of what could come. I stumbled forward through the drifts of snow. The wind howled against my ears. Still, I heard a branch snap somewhere in the distance on my right side. I shifted my flashlight expecting to see another deer or some other animal. Only the snow and trees. So I pressed forward. Another branch snapped. Again I looked around, only to find nothing. I carefully listened, doing what I could to block out the heavy wind. There was a faint sound coming from those woods. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It sounded like a man was singing in those woods. I couldn't make out any words. I picked up the pace, ignoring the pain I had felt earlier in my feet. My house lights were in view. Just a little further and I would finally be inside, in the warmth of my own home. The man's voice grew closer. I began running as fast as I could through the drifts of snow, my boots stomping against the thick white powder and ice. When I finally reached the house, every light was on. That should have been my first clue. My wife Mandy was a stickler for wasting energy. She also wasn't one to be afraid of the dark, but I was too distracted with the idea that someone was singing in those woods, and they were following me home. I tried for the front door first. It was locked. I pounded my fists against the door and yelled for her to let me in. I pulled my keys out and tried to unlock it, but something was jammed in the lock. I ran behind the house to the back door. To my relief, the back door was unlocked. I stumbled inside and dropped to the floor, my body frozen and frail by both the cold and terror. All I could hear from the outside was just the wind. "Mandy!" I yelled as I sat on my knees and inhaled the thick, warm air into my lungs. "Were you just going to let me freeze out there?" I leaned my back against the door I had just come through. Whatever anger I had felt was justified had vanished in a blink of an eye as my eyes shifted towards the carpet floor in front of me. Dead curled leaves and streaks of what looked like dirt were spread all across the living room floor. It looked like she had dragged something from outside into the house. I pulled myself off the dirty carpet and shifted my focus towards the back of the front door. My fingers slightly touched the scratch marks along the wood grain. Dried droplets of blood left trails behind each mark. Something was stuck into the wood. I carefully pulled it out and brought it closer to my face. It was one of her fingernails. I dropped it to the floor as my heart stopped, and the realization had stepped in. Something had happened here. Something had happened to her. I looked all around the living room, books scattered along the floor. A recliner was tipped on its side. How much of this was us? How much of it was by my own hand? I shook my head and pressed my cold face against my sweaty palms. It was only 6 rounds, and that was after I had left her here alone. I took a deep, long breath and stood there in a room that had no longer felt like it was mine. I spoke the words I had repeated throughout my lifetime, over and over again under my liquored breath. I am not my father. I paced back and forth, looking for clues. I called for her again, not expecting her to be in the house, yet I still felt I had to try. There was no answer, only the sound of the howling wind and something else, a buzzing noise. My blood ran cold as I listened to the 2 knocks at the front door. "Mandy?" No answer. I looked out the window but couldn't see anyone there. I slowly opened the door. Cold wind rushed against my face. No one was there. I looked down at the tracks in the snow. Only my own. Then I saw it. Right there by my feet, laying perfectly in place, just waiting for me. It was my phone. My hands shook as I held my phone and shut the front door. The dim screen had brightened as a call came in. The phone vibrated in my hands as I froze in confusion. My wife was calling me. I answered the call and slowly raised the phone to my right ear and swallowed whatever I had left in my dry throat as I answered. "Mandy, where are you?" I could hear her breathing. "Mandy, this isn't funny. Where the hell are you?" My wife's soft-spoken voice cracked through the speaker. "You did this to me." I paced back and forth as I held my phone tightly against my ear. The living room lights flickered. "I did what? What the hell are you talking about? Where the fuck are you?" Her voice cried out. "You left me. You left me all alone in this awful house, and now it has me." "Mandy." "And you know what, Michael? It wants you too," she hissed. "What are you talking about?" I tried my best to not get angry, not to let out any of the thoughts I had in my head since the first drink. She never played games like this with me, and none of this had made any sense. Was it even a game? I tried to speak again, but none of the words had escaped my dry mouth. "Come outside." The call ended. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked down at it. The battery symbol flashed once and then the phone turned off. I went over to the living room window, ignoring the small branches and dead leaves crunching underneath my boots as I pulled the curtain back enough to see the whole driveway. No one was there. She wasn't by the front door nor anywhere that I could see. I picked up my iPad and then threw it against the love seat. The internet was off. I can only assume the connection was broken by the storm that still raged outside. I plugged my phone into the charger and searched for clues. My eyes shifted to the doorknob. It was covered in dried blood. The handprint didn't look like hers, far too big. I moved closer and held out my hand. 5, or was it 6 pours of whiskey? That wasn't enough, not for this. No. Besides, I didn't drink before we fought. I would have remembered leaving this. The bloody handprint matched the size of my hand. I quickly pulled back my hand and stood there pondering for some time. My father's grin in the police cruiser flashed through my darkened mind. I shook my head as if I was answering to someone other than myself. I am not my father. Besides, she had just called me. She was alive. That was the important thing. Once I find her, I can make sense of what she was saying, figure out whatever this thing was that she was talking about. Whatever happened here wasn't by my hand, even if I have to keep reminding myself. I called for my wife again, as if expecting her to come out of hiding. When she had called me, it didn't sound like she was outside. I think I would have heard the wind blowing into the mic. Her screams from the fight earlier still rang in my head. She was furious at where her life had taken her. She blamed me for being so poor, for being such a pathetic excuse of a human being. I blamed her all the same. I wanted to hurt her. I wanted to show her that you can't treat people this way, that somehow in my righteous mind beating her would correct her. She needed to be corrected. Yet so did I. Although there I stood, worried for her well-being, as if I were so holy. I moved towards the kitchen room window. I couldn't see anything. I then checked all the closets and other rooms. Nothing to be found, not even in our unfinished basement. Frustrated, I went back towards my phone, 1% charged. I cursed under my breath as I wiped the sweat from my forehead and went to the living room window again. The living room lights above me flickered once more. I looked down at her car in the driveway. It was covered in snow. If she was in trouble, I would imagine she would have tried to drive the car after I ignored her for so long. Something else had caught my eye. There in the distance near our driveway stood the metal pole that our dusk to dawn light was attached to. Next to it was a tree. The yellow light illuminated the overly long, leafless branches. It looked old and fragile as it swayed back and forth against the heavy wind. The tree limbs were reaching towards the night sky. I had stood there staring at the tree for some time. For the life of me, I couldn't remember there ever being a tree next to the driveway light. I went back into the kitchen one last time. Broken glasses of plates and tossed silverware spread across the kitchen table and floor. That was us. That I know for sure. I picked up one of the glass shards of a blue plate and held it out in front of me. How could we be so pathetic? We used to be madly in love. I would cherish the days I could smell her and hold her. I resent her. I resented myself most of all. What had we become? I tossed the piece away into the trash bin. Where the hell did she go? Not finding her should only cause me more panic, but honestly, it only angered me more. Still, the thought of her toying with me lingered in my head. She was wasting my time. I could have been drinking in the warm bar, another pour of whiskey in my hands, but instead there I am in my own hell. That was when I heard her again. This time it wasn't from my phone. Mandy screamed my name somewhere from outside the walls. I rushed to get my coat on, the flashlight clenched in my hand as I unlocked the front door and pushed it wide open without a second thought. The howling wind came screeching across my face as I moved forward onto the driveway. I yelled for her and waited. I heard her scream again somewhere further up the driveway towards the light pole. I pushed forward through the thick snow. My bare hand gripped tightly onto the cheap flashlight. I stopped just under the driveway light post and looked around me. She was nowhere to be found. I called for her again. My heart was pounding in my chest. She did not answer again. Only the howling wind pressed against my eardrums. Where the hell was she? My stomach turned. Deep down, I knew all along it wasn't some sick game. I looked down at the ground beneath my feet. It took me a few seconds to realize what I was seeing, and that's when I froze. I was standing in a large spot untouched by snow, even though it had been coming down for several hours now. The ground was torn and muddy, as if someone had used a cultivator on this single spot by the light post. I stumbled a few feet backwards. It was impossible. The tree was gone. She screamed again. This time she did not say my name. It was a scream of pure agony. I quickly aimed in the direction it was coming from, somewhere deep in the woods. The sound of tree branches shifted and snapped, sending a shiver up my spine. Something big was moving in those woods. My entire body had filled with fear. I turned around and raced towards the front door. A loud crunching sound emerged behind me. As I ran inside and slammed the front door, I fell to the floor with my back pressed against the door. Amongst the howling wind and moving closer to my door, I could hear a man singing. I now recognized the voice that haunted me. At the time, I couldn't make out the words amongst the howling winter storm. But now, as I lose a part of myself, bit by bit, I can hear it clearly. My father still haunts me. Not because he's a ghost. Not because he's alive. He haunts me because that's what it wants. Somehow what it's been doing isn't enough for its own satisfaction. Agony. That's what it craves. Not fear, not love, not meat, just agony. Every Christmas morning, my father, before he had become a drunk, abusive psycho, would help my mother make breakfast. As us kids waited at the table, he would play some of his favorite Christmas-themed songs. One in particular comes to mind. Bing Crosby, Do You Hear What I Hear? The man's voice in the woods is the same voice of my father's. I can hear him now clear as day. He still sings the same two lines from the song. Do you hear what I hear? Do you see what I see? Over and over again. I stood there for some time by the living room window, a glass of whiskey in one hand and my hand pressed against the cold, fogging glass window. The tree was back in the same spot by the light post. It's different, though. Its roots appeared to be laying firmly above the snow, its branches no longer moving with the wind, like it no longer needed to blend in. I took another sip. What kind of a new hell is this? Even then I hoped that maybe I'll just wake up in my truck, that this was all just a fever dream. It has to be. How else could you explain why the tree was wearing my wife's face? It's not her skin, but I can see her face molded into the bark, like some artist came and carefully carved her face into it. I dropped the rest of the liquor onto the floor and swayed back and forth. It's not a tree. That was what she said, wasn't it? She wasn't calling to apologize. She wasn't begging for my response out of love or anger. She needed me to save her, and all I did was drink myself down to the bottom of the glass, just like my father. I suppose in a way I had become him, a worthless, horrible, angry man. There were tappings at the front and back door, gentle knocks like someone or something wanted in. I couldn't see, but I could only assume either there were people outside my house in that freezing cold, or that things' roots are so long. They had made their way down the driveway and up to my doors. They were tapping and scratching at the wood. The electricity flickered. I stumbled backwards and my semi-drunk ass fell to the floor. Soon the power would go, as it usually does during these intense storms. The only thing new was the monster outside my door. I crawled back up, my eyes centered back on the tree. An emptiness had filled my stomach as I swallowed my own spit out of shock. Her face was gone. A new one had emerged when I wasn't watching. There he was, a grin I had never forgotten. My father from the grave was staring back at me, smiling a sinister smile through the bark on that tree. The lights flickered again. It took her. It must have taken her. Maybe she was alive when I heard her screaming as it had lured me outside into the cold. Now there was no saving my wife. I couldn't even save myself. The scent of lavender had crossed my nostrils. I missed her. As much as I hated her that night, I missed her. She's gone because of me. I looked back out the window and jumped. My stomach felt as though it had dropped to the floor. My body had froze. The tree was only a few feet from the window. My father's eyeless face with that twisted smile. I didn't see it move, didn't even hear it. The lights flickered again. The tree's branches lowered like thousands of overly long fingers coming down from the dark heavens, only to wrap its limbs around the front of my living room. Whatever this thing was, it had me. Nowhere to go. The storm was in too thick. The damn phone hadn't charged enough. The internet was gone. No one was coming to save me. I suppose that's fitting, though. After all, no one came to save her. I pulled something out of my pocket, something I had kept hidden from its prying eyes until that very moment. One of the few things my wife had given me that I hadn't taken for granted. A lighter made out of pure platinum. It wasn't much, but I cherished it whenever I had a cigar. The whiskey I had poured earlier had soaked into the carpet in front of my feet. I don't know what this thing is, but if it is somehow a tree, then I felt assured it will burn like one too, if it tried to get me in here. I carefully tucked my journal back into my back pocket, not sure why I had decided to write any of this down. It'll just burn with me. Everything will burn with me. The flame flickered in front of me as I lowered a piece of paper from the journal towards it. I dropped the blank burning page to the floor and smiled back at the wretched thing. I then tucked the lighter back into my breast pocket. The fire ignited and crawled its way along the floor and up the white wall. I had nothing to live for. The woman who I had promised to take care of in sickness and health was gone, all because I didn't bother to listen to her when she needed me the most. I couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with what I've became anymore. The living room window glass shattered as several branches pushed their way in. The cold wind brushed past my body. I moved further back away from the gigantic flames and sat back into the love seat and closed my eyes. I could hear the branches snapping and the thing screeching its awful, inhuman cries as it tried to grab me. I opened my eyes and watched as the flames licked the branches and illuminated the darkness from outside. The thing pulled back and thrusted more stems forward again. That damn tree was a determined son of a bitch. The entire living room and front door was engulfed in fire. I didn't count how many bottles of liquor I had poured all over the house earlier. It didn't matter. I had fancied myself a good stockpile of liquor ever since the fighting had began. I smiled and held out my middle finger as the thing screeched behind the flames. I sat there on the couch and leaned back against the soft cushion and tilted my head back. The black smoke from the fire had filled the room. The sound of the wood burning brought a moment of happiness to my ears. Then things went dark. When I first came to, panic and confusion had settled in. It took a while for me to concentrate and to stop coughing. My lungs filled with what tasted like smoke and ash. I couldn't see anything. Not a single shred of light. I tried to move, but for some reason I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I felt and pushed all around me with my hands. All I felt was rough edges and wetness. Bits and pieces clung onto the palms of my hands, things I couldn't see. This was not my living room. I don't remember what came first. The sounds or the whole world moving as I stood there helpless in the dark. I checked my pockets and a slight relief washed over me. Both my lighter and journal were still on me. I tried my hardest to ignore the reality that had taken me for a ride. It was clear then that I was never going to escape. Again, I felt the movement of the world and the sounds of the tree moving through the woods. I pointed the lighter down towards my feet and felt a scream emerge from inside myself. I no longer had feet. My thighs were submerged, wrapped in wet roots and bark. I was inside the tree, inside this terrible thing, and it was absorbing me. My father began to sing again, his voice much louder and clearer this time from above my head, somewhere in the pitch darkness inside of this tree. This monster. I pushed and clawed as much as I could till my fingers bled. My eyes avoided all the other marks and nails caught in the wood by what I could only assume were its other victims. My voice had faded from my constant cries for help. Then I felt something new drop onto my left shoulder. It was long and wet. I grabbed and pulled it closer to my lighter. I was then reminded of the failure I had become. I held it tight against my trembling lips, the smell of lavender stronger than ever before. Hot tears slowly rolled down my face as I cried. I didn't think twice about the blood that was rolling down my hand as I clenched a part of my wife's scalp and the strands of her beautiful black hair. I thought there was a chance, but I understand now. That was never going to happen. It's going to let me die, just not so easily. Not until it has every bit of me, even my mind. Maybe this is what I deserved. Even as I write this with what little light I have left, I can't deny the insanity it brings to any sane person's eyes. How long can this last? I have a hard time believing it myself. Yet I can hear it. I can hear him. It singing above my head in the pitch black of its insides. I can feel it. I can feel it slowly digesting me bit by bit. I'm not sure how long I will last. There is pain, but at least it feels warm. There's not much light left in this precious gift of mine, so let these be my last words. Should you find this journal, know that my wife and I are long gone. It's not a tree.